handsome guy with deepest voice ever. So satisfying you'll want to rewatch. The first time anyone heard Ethan Rivers speak, they swore the ground vibrated. His voice was so deep, so warm, so strangely soothing that people often paused mid-sentence just to hear him finish a word. But Ethan never cared about having the deepest voice ever. In fact, he rarely spoke at all. At 26, he spent most of his time working his quiet job at a small community center in Ohio, avoiding crowds, cameras, and anything that might draw attention to him. On a chilly Friday evening, however, everything changed. The center was hosting its annual open mic fundraiser, an event meant to bring the community together, share stories, and raise money for families struggling through the winter. Most of the regular performers were kids learning guitar, teens trying stand-up comedy, or elderly folks reciting poems written decades ago. Ethan, as usual, volunteered backstage, handing out bottles of water and adjusting microphones. But something unusual happened that night. A little girl named Harper stood trembling behind the curtains, clutching a crumpled sheet of paper. She was supposed to perform a short poem about kindness, but the moment she saw the crowd, her courage dissolved. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she shook her head rapidly. I can't do it," she whispered. Ethan crouched down beside her. "Hey," he said softly, so softly that the resonance of his voice felt like a lullaby. Harper blinked up at him in surprise. "What's wrong?" "I'm too scared," she whispered. "Everyone's looking." Ethan could see her tiny hands trembling. He remembered being her age, afraid of speaking, afraid of standing out. He remembered years of people teasing him for his unusually deep voice, calling him the broken speaker in the human bass. He had learned the hard way that sometimes the world punished what made you different. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "What if I go out there?" "With you?" he asked. Harper's eyes widened. You would?" "Only if you want," he said. "You don't have to be alone." Harper nodded slowly, wiping her tears. A few minutes later, the curtains opened, and the crowd fell silent. People recognized Ethan, the handsome, quiet guy who always worked behind the scenes, but no one expected to see him on stage. He stood steady, offering Harper the microphone first. Her small fingers tightened around it. When she froze again, Ethan knelt beside her and whispered, "I've got you." And then, without thinking, he began to read the first line of her poem with her. When his voice filled the auditorium, people gasped. It wasn't just deep, it was impossibly smooth, like velvet layered over thunder. Every syllable rolled out with a richness that felt comforting, grounding, healing. And when Harper echoed the words after him, her voice trembling but growing braver with each line, the entire room seemed to lean in, breathing with them. Halfway through, Harper surprised everyone, especially Ethan, by speaking the lines on her own. Ethan stayed kneeling beside her, repeating the words only when she faltered. By the end, the little girl stood tall, finishing the final line of her poem in a clear, bright voice. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause. People rose to their feet, some wiping away tears, others smiling so broadly they could hardly contain it. Harper beamed with pride, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, the powerful warmth of being seen for something good, not mocked for something strange. But the night wasn't over. As Harper ran into her mother's arms, the event director stepped forward, still stunned. "Ethan," she said into the microphone, her voice full of disbelief. "That was unbelievable. Would you sing something for us?" Ethan froze. Sing? In front of all these people? The fear he had buried for years rose in his chest. He shook his head slightly, but then he saw Harper looking back at him, her expression hopeful, encouraging. The girl who just faced her own fear was silently asking him to face his. Ethan drew a slow breath. If it's okay," he began, "I'll try." The crowd quieted instantly. He chose an old classic, one his grandmother used to hum while cooking Sunday breakfast. When he began, the room seemed to melt around him. His voice poured out like warm molasses, deep enough to feel in the heartbeat, gentle enough to calm the mind. People closed their eyes. Some held their chest, overwhelmed. Others smiled as though they had just heard something they didn't know they needed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. It was human. It was Ethan. When he finished, the applause was deafening. Strangers hugged him. Teenage boys thumped him on the back. Elderly women squeezed his hand and told him his voice felt like home. But the most touching moment came when Harper tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Thank you for helping me be brave." Ethan knelt to meet her gaze, and she added, "You helped me, so let me help you too." It was then that Ethan realized something profound. Sometimes the smallest voices help us find our own. The fundraiser shattered its donation goal that night. Videos of Ethan's performance, filmed by half the audience, spread online within hours. People around the world wrote about how soothing, how comforting, how unbelievably deep his voice was. But for Ethan, none of that mattered as much as the simple truth he had learned on stage. Courage grows when it's shared, and kindness, even the smallest act of it, can change a life, even your own. Ethan returned to work the next morning, a little taller, a little braver, and a lot more grateful. For the first time in a long time, he didn't fear people hearing his voice. He looked forward to it, because now he knew something he wished he had understood years ago. Your gift becomes a blessing the moment you use it to lift someone else.